Hi, Emma. Sorry, could you speak again, please?
Yes, certainly, Jack. This is a test 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you hear me, please?
Yep, that's perfect, Emma.
Thank you very much. Members, again, thank you very much for your patience this evening. We wasn't expecting these technical issues, but I'm sure you appreciate as we move forward with this technology, we may have these minor glitches. So members, with your permission, I will start the speech again for the benefit of the public watching this through the Council's YouTube channel. However, I will not ask the broadcast officers to confirm that the YouTube channel is proceeding because this has now been tested. Thank you. So good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Council's meeting of Cabinet. Before we commence the meeting, there are some housekeeping matters that we do need to attend to. The Council is broadcasting this meeting via its YouTube channel to make sure it's public. This channel has been set up so it enables anybody to observe our democratic meetings. So members, please be aware that this can be watched anytime, anywhere, with anybody with access to the internet. Members, you are reminded that normal rules of defamation apply to this meeting, and any information that is given during this meeting is subject to rules of freedom of information, data protection, and access to information rules. Members, there is a small delay between the live meeting that you're participating in and the broadcast via the YouTube channel, which is approximately 30 seconds. I can confirm that the Council has adopted some basic etiquette rules for this remote meeting, and these are as follows. Please only speak when the Chairman invites you to do so. Please let the Chairman know that you wish to speak by raising your hand. When asked to vote, please raise your hand. Please minimise all distractions while you are in the meeting and mute your microphone when not speaking. Members, you may wish to consider turning off your video to reduce the interference on the audio feed. Please bear in mind that there may be a slight lag between speeches and other attendees hearing you. Please quote page numbers and slide numbers when referring to officers' documentation. Members, we do have business in part 2 that is private session, and it is your responsibility to make sure that your venue and connection is private. If you lose connection at any point and you're unable to rejoin the meeting immediately, please call the meeting facilitator at Causeway House on extension 2610. I will be monitoring the participations list through the Zoom facility. The members of the Cabinet for the public are Councillors Graham Butland, Councillor Tom Cunningham, Councillor Frankie Ritchie, Councillor John McKee, Councillor Mrs Schmidt, Councillor David Bebb, Councillor Peter Tasley, Councillor Kevin Bowers and Councillor Mrs Spray. They are the meetings of the Cabinet and are present at this meeting. There are other members in attendance at the invitation of Councillor Butland. These are Councillor Mrs Pell, Councillor Abbott and Councillor Mann. These members may participate in the debate but cannot vote on items. There are also a number of officers in attendance and they are indicated on the Zoom by a prefix of officer. We have an officer taking the minutes for this meeting, and Chloe Glock, and I am the meeting facilitator. I can confirm that this meeting is quorate and may proceed. I will now hand over to the Chairman, Councillor Graham Butland. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Butland, your microphone is on mute.
Get used to this. Good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public. Welcome to this, our first virtual Cabinet meeting of Braintree District Council. Before we start on the agenda, I would just point out that it is Thursday evening and 8 o'clock there will be the usual show of support for NHS, care and other frontline workers. And as it may be the last occasion, I intend that I give members the opportunity to do that. And I know many of you will want to be part of your local communities outside your front door. So if we are still in session towards 8 o'clock, my intention will be to adjourn the meeting at 2 minutes to 8 and to reassemble at 5 minutes past 8. What we will do is mute our microphones and also all switch off our videos so that the screen just ends up with our names. And then as we come back towards 5 past 8, we will all join again. Okay. If we're not in session at that stage, then we won't need to do that. So item 1, apologies for absence. I don't believe there are any apologies for absence. Is that correct?
It is, Chairman. All members of the Cabinet are present this evening and all invitees are present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 2, public question time. I've not been advised that there are any members of the public who wish to put a question at this meeting. I believe that's correct, Emma?
Chairman, yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on Monday, the 9th of March. They have been previously circulated. Those present who were present at that time, are you happy that they are a true record? And please show by your hand if you agree. Thank you. That's done, and clearly I will sign those at some time in the future. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest any member wishes to make? I'm not seeing any hands, so we will take that as none at the moment. If anything crops up during the course of any debate, etc., which a member thinks it appropriate, please feel free and indeed obligated to make it at that stage. Okay, move on to item 5 and 5A, decisions made by the Chief Executive under the urgency provisions. These are provisions that came in when the pandemic started, and I'll ask the Chief Executive just to draw our attention to the items which are on pages 5 to 10 of your agenda. Andy Wright.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. The report before you this evening summarises the 7 decisions that were taken while our meetings were cancelled due to the recent pandemic. The decisions fall into 2 categories. There were 3 items that were already due to go and reports written to go to the 23rd of March full council, but all of those needed decisions to be made in the interests of the council going forward. And there are 4 decisions that were required were due to the impact of COVID on council services and so forth. So the report before you is for noting. It summarises each of the decisions taken. There was appropriate consultation undertaken on all of the decisions before I made the decision, and all of them have been published on the website immediately at the point I took the decision. The report before you this evening is there because as part of our constitution, I have to report them for noting to Cabinet and full council on Monday evening at the first available meeting. So I'm not planning to go through the detail. The reports are there on each of the individual decisions, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any comments or questions from any members? No, if not, you're happy to note the decisions taken by the Chief Executive? Please, by show of hands. Agreed. Thank you. Right, that takes us on to item 6, finance and performance management, and item 6A, COVID-19 impact on council finances, which you will find on pages 11 to 21 of your agenda. Councillor David Bebb.
Yes, this report provides an up-to-the-minute update on the financial support provided to businesses and council taxpayers being funded by government, and also an initial assessment of the impact of the pandemic on council finances. Now, I might add that the communication corridor between BDC and MHCLG have been highly congested with a launch at relatively short notice of several support schemes. So I want to put on record my sincere appreciation of the can-do, super responsiveness and flexibility and impressive assiduity of officers in implementing these schemes. Now, I'll just briefly go through first of all, businesses. The business rate, retail, hospitality and leisure discount and nursery relief. This discount scheme previously announced that was increased from 50% to 100%, and the maximum rateable value limit of 51,000 was removed. So this means this expanded retail relief schemes that 833 businesses will pay no business rates in 2021. The cost of this is 17.875 million. The government will reimburse the full council for this. On the 18th of March, the Department of Education announced that nurseries would also be brought into the fold, and 100% relief has been granted to 20 nurseries for a total of 182,000. Business support grants to small businesses and businesses in that retail, hospitality and leisure sector two grant schemes were introduced for 2021 for Small Business Grant Fund and the Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant Fund. Now, I'm pleased to say, as of yesterday, 2,333 businesses have been paid a total of £27.23 million, and this represents payments to 95% of the businesses considered to be eligible. Now, very recently, the government have announced a new discretionary fund, which would be set up to accommodate certain small businesses previously outside the scope of the business grant scheme. Now, we've just received an allocation of 1.537 million, and which we are currently determining the criteria to be used to pay businesses which were not eligible for the existing grant schemes. The maximum amount stipulated by the government is £25,000, although the government anticipates that the average value will be under £10,000, given that the allocation available is relatively small and the council will want to support as many businesses as possible. I now turn to council taxpayers. The government announced at the budget that the local authorities would receive an allocation from the 500 million hardship fund to deliver relief to council taxpayers in the area. Now, this council received just under £900,000 on April the 3rd. The government's strong expectation is for billing authorities to provide all recipients of working age local council tax support during the financial year, with a further reduction in their annual council tax bill of £150. Now, I can confirm as of today that approximately 4,500 households received a reduction of £150 on their council tax liability for this year. I might just say the council tax collected in April was somewhat short. There was 10.862 million collectible. This compares to 10.875 million last year, for the same period last year. Now, moving on to the last section on the potential impact on the council's bottom line, on the council finances. Now, the government requested an indication of the financial implications of the pandemic on local authorities over the initial period of March and April, and a projection for the year. At the time, our return showed an additional expenditure of around £245,000, most of which was spent, in fact, on additional IT facilities for staff working from home. But the main thing was a reduction of income received of just over £3 million. And this gives an estimated total impact of £3.3 million. Page 20 shows a schedule of the identified extra costs and reduced income. Now, the council initially received from the government an allocation of £61.4 thousand on the 27th of March from the government's local authority support. From the government's 1.6 billion local authority support grant. And on the 28th of April, the government published the allocations of the second tranche from the 1.6 million pound of local support to local authorities. And this time, this council was to receive 1.505 million, gives a total allocation for the two tranches of 1.566 million pounds to cover the financial losses. Now, this hasn't covered it all, of course. A second return of the estimated consequences of COVID-19 on the council finances was submitted on the 15th of May. As with the first return, the main issue is that of reduced income from a shortfall of £2.137 million anticipated for the first 4 months of the year, and an additional unbudgeted expenditure of £346,000 expected to be incurred in the first 4 months of the year. This is a total shortfall of nearly £2.5 million, from which we have currently received from the emergency fund payment from the central government of £1.566 million. Now, we're a bit disappointed here because the government had specified for the second return, the anticipated impact should only be assessed for April to July inclusive, in order that a consistent approach was adopted by authorities. Whilst this request was complied with, we consider that this underestimates the total impact for this particular year. We understand, however, that further returns will be requested on a monthly basis, and the next one I think is due in July or August. Finally, I'd just like to comment that about our cash flow. I'm pleased to say that our cash flow continues to be closely monitored with no concerns at this time. Indeed, the precept payments to the major preceptors and parish and town councils together with the pension deficit payments for 2021 and 2023, were all made as scheduled in April and May. Cash flow has been helped by the government deferring the business rate payments due from the council for April to June until the remaining 9 months of the year. So I think I'll stop at that point and would welcome any questions from colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bebb. Are there any comments or questions anyone has? Councillor Tattersley, and I've got Councillor Abbott. Councillor Tattersley first.
I'd just like to say, Chairman, that the feedback that I've had from businesses in the Three Fields ward is that it's been a very straightforward process, and the staff have been extremely helpful in guiding those who want to make an application through the process. And I think there's a lot of credit deserved to the people that have been dealing with that.
Thank you, Councillor Tattersley. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So following on from that, yes, I would like to also commend the work of staff, and also can I say the very collegiate cross-party working that the leader has shown with all groups in this very difficult time in supporting local communities. My question is, does the Cabinet member at this stage, and based on current trends, have any idea, say at half year and full year, what the total impact is likely to be on the council's finances?
Well, at the moment, as I indicated, what we've been allocated doesn't actually cover all our costs at the moment. So it's a bit fluid. We keep putting in our filling in the forms, and then we're allocated a bit more. We're hoping that in fact we won't be too severely out of pocket, but we don't know how long the funding will keep flowing from the government to fulfil our shortfalls. So it's quite fluid at the moment.
Okay, any other comments or questions at all? I mean, I agree with Councillor Bebb. Clearly at the outset, the clear message to local authorities from central government, from ministers, was don't worry about the cash, just make sure that we deliver. I think we've been doing that, and I'm grateful for the comments from members about the way in which our staff, not just staff in finance, but throughout the whole organisation, have responded to it. And that I think is something we can all be proud of. One hopes that the stuff that is going back to the centre will help the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to make its case to Treasury, because after all, they are having the success that they get will impact upon what is available to local government. But certainly there is no doubt that there will be serious financial questions which will need to be answered as we move forward into next year and subsequent years. And I think it could well be a very interesting budget process this year, which with as, if not more uncertainty than we have in most years. But clearly I'm delighted that the way in which our finance staff have responded, and also the fact that we've been able to ensure that the other precepting authorities, particularly of course the County Council, which is by far the largest, that we have been able to forward on exactly what they were expecting. So that is helpful. If there are no other questions, are you happy to note the report that you have before you this evening? Will you please show by raising your hands? Thank you very much. Okay, that will take us to item 7A, Horizon 120. Members will be aware that they have before them two papers tonight. One in the public meeting, which is the part we are now, which is pages 22 to 30 of your agenda, and one in the private session, 31 to 40. I normally try and merge the two together so that we can take it all in one go. I think given the fact that this is a major project by this council, and that there are a lot of commercial and confidence figures involved, I have asked Councillor McKee to actually, in part 2, go into some detail regarding the figures, etc. So, because I think, as I say, it is such a major project, I wouldn't want members to think that we were in any way trying to sort of take advantage of the current situation and slide things through, etc. So what we will do is take the paper that's in the public arena, which will deal with the main, all about the project and issues, etc. The only thing it won't deal with is some of the commercial in confidence financial figures. As and when we have dealt with that, which is the last item on our public meeting, I will then close that meeting. I'll move that we go into private session, close the public meeting, and then we will move into the private session. So without more ado, I'll ask Councillor McKee, please, to give his introduction to paper 7A.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, members on YouTube, I'm delighted to present the report to Cabinet detailing the costs for the Horizon 120 development of the employment site in Great Notley. Colleagues remember that this site was originally allocated in the local plan over a decade ago to be developed as a site for jobs in the district alongside Notley Garden Village residential site on the other side of the A131. A private developer was unwilling or unable to proceed, and the jobs alongside housing were not delivered. Now is the time for us to put that right. The Council has both the opportunity and the responsibility to realise the potential of Horizon 120, achieving what the private sector, working alone, failed to deliver over the preceding 10 years. The proposals are consistent with the agreed vision, but require decisions which lie beyond the delegated authorities approved in July and December 2019. The purpose of this report is to make specific recommendations and to seek further delegated authority in order to expedite effective governance and decision making while minimising delay. This report proposes approval is granted for the infrastructure works contract to be procured through the SCAPE Group framework. At the completion of the procurement process, the contract is awarded for the infrastructure work. A total scheme cost budget be approved. Approval is sought from Council for the additional budget for the infrastructure works. The business case approved in February 2019 be amended to show that the total capital expenditure, projected land sales receipts, and a net surplus. Since the last report to Cabinet and Council, a local development order, as you heard from earlier from the Chief Executive, has now been finalised and adopted. Earthworks have commenced and the land transaction authorised by Cabinet on the 2nd December 2019 has been completed. Prior to the COVID-19 crisis, 5 companies had agreed terms for bespoke buildings, providing over 200,000 square feet on 17 acres. Unfortunately, since that time, 1 company has withdrawn. The remaining 4 companies are committed and will require buildings to be delivered within the next 18 months. The current requirements will utilise approximately 12 acres of the original 17. The Horizon 120 development is being actively marketed by 2 local agents and via a website details of which are in your papers. Inquiries are still being generated, albeit at a reduced level during the lockdown period, and it should be noted that no interest has been received from the hotel operators. And if you remember, originally we hoped for a hotel to go on this site due to them being badly affected by the COVID-19. It's therefore unlikely that a hotel interest in the development will be secured in the short or medium term. Infrastructure. The earthworks are being undertaken by Balfour Beatty and have commenced on site. These works include profiling the site to allow a gradient from the southeast corner by the roundabout on the A131 to the northwest corner, or Zone D as we're calling it, where a new attenuation pond and wildlife habitat is being created. The earthworks contract also includes the creation of a new highways junction on the southern boundary, which will serve the GridServe electric forecourt development, originally expected to open for business at the end of June 2020, will be delayed but is expected to open now in September 2020. Balfour Beatty have completed the detailed technical design and are now seeking at least 3 vendors for each subcontract package. They have also obtained quotations for connections to the utilities on site. Surface water drainage is being managed on site by Systems Wales, connecting to a stormwater drain which will discharge into the new attenuation pond in the northwest corner. The infrastructure required on site is being procured in three stages, and we'll come on the private session to talk about the effect of those three stages on costs. Feasibility, which included detailed design and programming, this stage is now complete. Stage 1, which includes reprofiling the site and formation of highways junction on the southern boundary, this stage is currently underway and will completed next month. Stage 2 is the infrastructure build, which includes Northern Highways Junction, estate roads, landscaping and utilities. In accordance with SCAPE framework protocols, this sum is in effect a guaranteed maximum price and is expected to reduce when the subcontract tenders are returned. The council will have sight of all the subcontract tenders and be able to validate the final contract sum. Following appointment of Balfour Beatty for the earthworks, considerable due diligence, including negotiations with the statutory utility firms, has resulted in an estimated capital cost for the complete infrastructure, and these figures have been included in a revised business model. These figures are the estimated maximum external costs. The revised financial model now has made provision for carrying costs such as professional fees, archaeology work, which we did find archaeology on site, and capitalized personnel and interest costs. The revised business case is deliberately cautious, reflecting both a reduced land value for at least the next 6 months, entirely due to the revaluation of land values in May 2020, recognizing the effect of COVID-19. The total infrastructure costs and capitalized interest, the valuation advice showing a current reduction per net developable acre, but confirmed that as the current situation is a health rather than a financial crisis, values can be expected to recover over the next 12 months. You clearly would expect us to look at some options. There are many being looked at, but there are three, I think, which are worthy of some note. It's a planning condition that the new pond in the northwest corner of the site is created and landscaped as soon as possible. To allow removal of the existing pond in the southern boundary, removal of the existing pond is necessary to create the southern highways junction. Partial completion will incur additional costs, so we could decide to partially complete rather than do the whole thing now, but that will additional costs due to the remobilization of any contractor and as a result of that construction cost inflation. Furthermore, partial completion is likely to cause needless delay as it could require a new procurement process if Balfour Beatty were not selected, as they are unlikely to be cost effective. The 4 businesses currently planning to relocate on Horizon 20 are subject to lease expiry. If they do not have confidence in delivery, they may well decide on an alternative relocation plan. There are some risks in your paper on section 4. However, I'll draw your attention to I think 2 risks particularly. It's possible that the infrastructure will be completed and that no occupiers will be secured. Given the lack of competing sites in and within the local area, including Colchester, Chelmsford and Stansted, this risk is considered notional. Recent news regarding the employment land at Stansted is that the buyer has withdrawn and the land is back on the market, and therefore slowed down that delivery of employment land at Stansted. As reported earlier, the valuation advice has indicated the COVID-19 crisis will have a short-term and adverse impact on land values. And the revised business case assumes a recovery by late 2020. The valuation advice is that this reflects the lack of competition and Horizon's distinctive offer of both infrastructure underway and a detailed planning permission in advance for compliant schemes. However, as a prudent measure, a second valuation is being commissioned as Jet required of me to do. The council received a business case for Horizon 120 on the 19th of February 2019, and a capital budget was approved to progress a phased delivery of infrastructure works, having completed the relevant land acquisition. The business case was reviewed and reported to full council on the 22nd of July 2019, with an increase in capital budget for infrastructure was approved. This included the provision of a second site. The council has now received updated cost estimates provided by Balfour Beatty, which have taken into account proposal to increase the scope of infrastructure works and to complete them in a single phase, not 2 phases originally planned. A review of all other professional and other fees has been undertaken, along with a revised cash flow. Compared to February 2019, Scheme work cost estimates are higher for infrastructure works due to increased scope of works and generally higher costs for professional and other fees, some of which can be offset by reductions in the marketing and planning costs when compared with the original assumptions. The revised estimate also allows for some minor off-highway works and archaeology work that have become necessary. The financing costs have increased overall due to a combination of earlier and higher expenditure, coupled with reprofiling of service land sales and market value assumptions. There is a potential for cost to be reduced through the tendered subcontract works. However, there's also risk for increased cost on utilities. The assumption at this stage is that these are likely to be outweighed by the expected reduction in the feasibility estimate. The amount and timing of income from the sale of service land has been reviewed, including the potential short-term downturn of market values during the current pandemic. The details of the financing, borrowing, use of capital, treatment of interest, etc. are included in your papers in section 5. I don't plan to state them again here, but will be kept under review throughout the development by the Corporate Director of Finance, who will manage revenue versus capital gains through the flexible use of capital balances. It's worth noting that this strategic development contributes towards 4 important corporate objectives. 1, a sustainable environment and a great place to live, work and play. A well-connected and growing district with high quality homes and infrastructure. A prosperous district that attracts business growth and provides high quality employment opportunities. A high performing organisation that delivers excellent value for money. The proposal in the report are outside the delegations granted by Council in December 19. Accordingly, the budget increase is referred to Cabinet for consideration at this meeting, and therefore requires full Council approval next week. The infrastructure works will be procured through SCAPE framework. This framework is available for local authorities to use for construction projects. It's already been used in other parts of the scheme for the identification, of Balfour Beatty for the earthworks required on site. I won't now put the recommendation forward because I think the recommendation is better put in the private session where the numbers will be more meaningful. And I suggest I take any questions about the substance of this report and we'll perhaps go into the more detailed session financial when the YouTube channel is closed down. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Councillor McKee, for that detailed report. Are there any comments or questions any members have? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the Cabinet member for his very full report. Obviously, this is an important site for employment going forward in the district, but he also discussed some of the issues around obviously the current virus pandemic and the impact that's had on market conditions. Can he assure us that in terms of sustainability, which he himself referred to as one of the key elements of this proposal, that the council is intent on making sure that not just the new habitat and replacement habitat area is delivered in full, but also that the site as a whole, and this is something I raised on the reference group, is a greener site, a more attractive site for both wildlife and the people working there than a standard employment site might be, that it's done to a very high standard.
Through you, Chair, I can confirm that the business case with the original plans, I think as you're aware of, Councillor Abbott, we are intending this to be a poster child for what a great employment site looks like, and use it to be an example of how green and how energy efficient a site can be. If you're asking me during the pandemic, are we then going to cut back on those design criteria through the LDO? No, we're not. We're going to keep to our original plan to make this a site of which we as a council and our residents can be proud of for the next 30 to 40 years.
Thank you.
I think I can assure you, Councillor Abbott, there are at least 3 members of Cabinet who will be watching that very, very closely to make sure that there are no changes. Namely Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Cunningham and myself. Right, okay. Any other comments at all? Or Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That sort of neatly segues into what I was going to say in support of Councillor McKee. And when we first started to look at not only making the acquisition of the land at Horizon 120, but what we actually wanted Horizon 120 to be, it was always with the highest of ambition, not only in terms of attracting jobs, attracting that much needed inward investment into the district of Braintree, but an exemplar place to work with the highest standards of environmental sustainability, but also actually the infrastructure, both practical infrastructure in terms of roads and utilities, but also social infrastructure as well. Therefore, I'm very, very supportive of the proposal this evening to increase the capital budget to bring forward that infrastructure. I think, although Councillor McKee alluded to perhaps the lack of other sites at the moment, in ensuring we attract that inward investment from afar, having a site where the infrastructure plan is clearly set out and a clear timetable of delivery, I think is going to be enormously attractive to those potential businesses who may well be hovering over the decision to come to our part of North Essex, into the district of Braintree. I think having that infrastructure in place can really help seal those much needed deals in terms of these businesses coming. So I'm hugely supportive of that and of the work that's been going on behind the scenes, and encouraged, despite the very difficult times that we're all living through at the moment, and that there is optimism in the market that the viability of Horizon 120 will prevail, and prevail very strongly, and not just in the medium term, but of course in the long term as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McKee spoke of a second valuation that has been required to be undertaken. Is there any date for the end of that valuation, and when might it be available?
Councillor McKee.
Can I thank you, Councillor Mann. Can I ask one of the officers actually, who probably has got that information? I mean, I think it's ongoing, and that would be. If I can't see him on the thing. Is Aidan Kelly on on somewhere? Oh,
yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Aidan. Do you want to? Can you answer that?
It will happen over the next few weeks. The valuation practices have a lot of staff furloughed at the moment, so there is a delay in people getting out there. The residential market has started again, so valuers are starting to work again, but it's work in progress, and I would expect 4 to 6 weeks at a reasonable estimate.
Okay. Kim, I think, if I may just seek advice, I think we need to pass the 3 recommendations that are on page 23 for the purposes of this part 1. So I'm going to ask, are you in favour of the recommendations as shown at the top of page 23? Can I have your show of hands if you are, please? Thank you very much. That then, I'm conscious of the time, that brings us to the end of part 1, although we have members been asked to move into private session in order to discuss elements of detail within the private report. Can I have your agreement by show of hands, please, that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the report and this debate be considered private on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Are you happy to consent to that? Please show. Thank you. Members' consent having been given, as there are no further items in public session, I will close the public session of this meeting at 19:57, and we will reassemble at 20:05 for the private session of this meeting, giving time for us to appropriately acknowledge the work of people of the NHS carers, etc. So could I ask Emma, please, that the necessary things are done so that we can both, we will mute
Sorry, Councillor Butland, you muted your microphone prematurely.
I wouldn't wish to be premature. Right, there we are.
Thank you, members. Please can the webcast officer terminate the YouTube broadcast and confirm when it's terminated, please?